Hello everyone. Today I have with me N Kalyan Raman, who translates modern and contemporary Tamil fiction and poetry into English. Kalyan Raman has translated fiction by eminent Tamil writers including Ashokamitran, Challappa, Pumani, Devi Bharati, Perumal Murugan, and Salma. We are having this conversation at the background of the new reissue of his translated work, Vadivasal, The Arena, by Simon and Schuster. Kalyan Raman, thank you so much for accepting the invitation and coming to the show. And I want to start by taking your first response to the Heart Lamp winning International Booker Prize. What this movement means to Indian literature in English translation, and what does this movement mean to you as a translator?
Okay, I'll answer the question in two parts. The first is my own personal reaction to the Heartland winning the International Booker Prize this year. I was very happy. I was very happy that that a Kannada work, from a language which is not so well served, relatively underserved by English translation, won the right, and the work was about underprivileged uh, minority community. It is largely about women. I like that too. And most important of all, I like that the translator was not a native speaker of English. Somebody homegrown with an Indian language as mother tongue uh, had won the prize. Because if you recall, the earlier International Booker Prize win from India was the translator was Daisy Rockwell, who's sort of American born. So this was particularly satisfying because one has a sort of kinship with translators who are resident in India and trying to trying to be good enough for the world in English. So I'm very happy. Now, as far as whether this is an inflection point or what does it mean for translation from India, I would think that this is a part of a continuing process. This is not the first time that a translation from India has made its mark abroad. Okay, I mean in recent years there was Chaurangi translated by Arunaval Sinha, which was accepted and it made a splash back in 2008. And then there was Gachar Gochar, there was Poonachi, there was One Part Woman, there was Pyre again by Perumal Murugan. So there have been all these uh, translations which have made a mark in some way, being nominated or longlisted for prestigious prizes and so on. So this is part of it. And why has this happened? It's because a community of translators have been working very hard for about 20, 25 years in producing quality translation, getting better and better at it, and inspiring, succeeding generations of translators to also do well. So I think that this is not an inflection point, but this is a sort of highlight, one of the high points of a continuum. And let's hope that there will be more such high points in the future.
No, I want to ask another question because
One more thing I want to add here is that my own focus as a translator, and I'm sure that this is true of many others as well, is that I want these translations to have an impact in India first, you know, on Indian society, to be widely read and having an impact on the consciousness of Indians first. I mean, that would be far more satisfying to me than a prize like Booker or National Book Foundation Award or something. Yeah.
so let's take a step back and start with your journey as a translator. You're a graduate from IIT and IIM and working in telecommunications. How did you arrive at the craft of translations?
Well, these things you start very early. I grew up in a household where reading was very natural, reading both in Tamil and in English. So I read a lot of, the classical literature in Tamil and then I read Subramanya Bharatiyar, who was a modernist poet. And then I started reading modernist fiction in Tamil while I was still in school. And of course, in school, you're also introduced to Shakespeare and Dickens and, and so on. So had I had developed a very strong uh, taste for literature, which is not unusual, really. And so I kept it up. I maintained it even during my college days. And I also had a flair for writing because, when you read a lot, you also feel like writing. And I was the editor of the campus magazine in IIT Madras, right, where I used to write half the stuff, half the magazine. But but I also started writing fiction while I was still in college, both in English and Tamil. And I had some measure of success in both. I published something, but as soon as I graduated and took a job, I realized that fiction writing, demanded too much, and I didn't have that much to give. And the second thing was having come from uh, professional institutions, uh, I had a strong imposter syndrome. Do I really know about literature? Do I really know? So I thought that I will take time off to understand what literature is and how it functions in society and all that. So, I, but I never sort of came back to fiction writing. I veered off. No, I wouldn't say veered off, but I took up essay writing. I wrote book reviews and so on. In Deccan Herald, for instance, I was living in Bangalore at that time. So I had most of what I wrote was published and all that, so it was not a problem for me. So it was through writing book reviews and reading continuously that I kept up my association with literature while I was doing the other stuff, while I was doing my day job and carrying on. But of course, I mean, my friends noticed that in India, it is very in certain circles, it's very rare for a person to be proficient in two languages. You know, uh, at least in my time it was, and in my circles it was, and so people noticed that that I was, reasonably well read in both Tamil and English. And one day, there was this friend of mine who was doing a anthology of fiction in the four southern languages, short fiction for Katha, which was a leading organization which published translations back in the 90s, early 90s. She was asking me about, the works of authors that she was considering for inclusion in the collection, Tamil authors. And I was, giving her the gyan that I that I was capable of giving at the time. And suddenly she said, "Why didn't you translate one of these stories?" And I was taken aback. But this time, if somebody was persuading me to be the imposter, why not? So I said, "Okay, I will. Uh, I'll do it." And that's how I started. Uh, the collection was called A Southern Harvest. It was edited by Geeta Hariharan, who was a novelist, well-known novelist and essayist. So, so that's how I started. My first story was published in 91 or 92, I think. And then somebody else approached me for translating Ashokamitran's stories. I translated a few of them. And then I got a commission to translate a full collection of Ashokamitran's stories, which was the first collection of his stories in translation, by the way. And so it went on, and I never looked back. I mean, I enjoyed translating. I grew to enjoy it, and it was also because I was kind of part of the Tamil literary milieu, the modern literary milieu. I knew writers, and I was keenly interested in what is being written, and so on. So for me, translation was also a part, was also a way to engage with that milieu, to which I found very satisfying. It still is in some ways. Yeah, my translation is definitely uh, comes from the fact that I am a part of the Tamil literary milieu. Yeah, so it sort of brings very many advantages to your practice as a translator, but that's how it is. So this is how I became a translator. That is through being a serious reader of literature in both languages, and through also being able to look at literature in a detached way, to see it in a wider perspective of society, from a critical perspective even, and to have developed some sense of discernment about what is good writing and what is not. And, to have some basic linguistic skill and literary sensibility. And for me, it all came together with translation.
Can you explain us what is this Tamil literary milieu that you are talking about?
Modern literature in Tamil, modern literature meaning literature about individuals and about society and so on. It began in true fashion, as a response to modernization of Tamil society, only in the 1930s, with the Manikodi group and all that. So, so this group kind of flourished. As you know, Tamil has a very long literary tradition, but most of it was in poetry. Prose itself, prose fiction, it came only in the latter half of the 19th century. So it was at the infant stage. And so more and more people came into literary production from different parts of society. And so it is very exciting. It is about a society becoming aware of itself through literature for the first time in its history. The classical Tamil literature and even the medieval literature and all was not about people and society or about the material conditions, really.
So who was
In a way, or about conditions of modernity. So there were a number of people who were involved in it. There were, establishing literary magazines, little magazines, writing in them, talking about it, and so on. So, and conducting readings and conducting meetings. So I was part of a group which produced a magazine called Pragya. Pragya is consciousness. Yeah. So we wrote, we published both fiction and nonfiction, a lot of nonfiction, in fact, and some of the biggest names, you know, uh, some of the people who wrote in Pranay grew up to be big names in Tamil literature and poetry. So we were also kind of left oriented, that particular group. And so we were sort of examining very seriously uh, how to get away from socialist realism, but not succumb to the art for art's sake kind of thing. So we were looking for a very enlightened way of looking at literature. So you can understand that all this can only be done when you're part of a community which is examining these questions. And many other questions are being examined even today, with this post-structuralism or whatever. I'm loosely a part of that milieu. I'm not central to it because, I have my stuff to do. So this is what I meant by Tamil literary milieu. So whenever, when young people write and so on, there is always some reflection, collective reflection going on about the state of Tamil literature, modern Tamil literature. And that I find quite exciting. Quite exciting to be part of it.
So next question I want to ask is how do you select the works that you want to translate. Because one stream
Okay.
that I have seen is there is a lot of marginalized voices being captured, right? Either it is Challappan's Vadivasan that you have translated, or the Poonachi by Perumal Murugan, or the Devi Bharati's Farewell Mahatma. There's marginalized voices. Is that the template that you use to select the works that you want to translate?
Well, I don't, okay, a good question. I believe that for a translator, uh, choosing the work to translate is very crucial because if you choose a mediocre or below par work, then you spend a couple of years translating it, and it may not even be read for 1 year, and it will just sink without a trace. So if you want your work to stand, then you have to choose work which has stood the test of time, right? And you have to choose writers who are good enough, who have produced works that are good enough to endure, so to speak, to be relevant eh, far into the future. So I wasn't conscious of this when I did my first 4 or 5 translations. I was lucky enough to be a friend, not a friend, but to know Mr. Ashokamitran as a writer, because I used to contribute to the magazine for which he was the managing editor, a magazine called Kanayari. So I met him, and then we got on talking, and then I became an avid reader of his works. So when I became a translator, the obvious author that I would pick was Ashokamitran, you know, because he was, I think, one of 2 or 3 preeminent writers in Tamil at that time. Uh, I think the others were Sundar Ramsamy and Jayakantan. So I picked Ashokamitran. I was offered a commission to do a short story collection of Ashokamitran. Uh, and then I went on to do, you know, my first 3 translations were by Ashokamitran. And the fifth one was also by Ashokamitran. Uh, you could say that if my translation career had stopped at that point, I would have been translating only Ashokamitran. So, so Ashokamitran is the is from the forward cast, but he wrote only about people who were dispossessed, who were marginal. But they were from the upper caste. Not all of them, but some of them. But he also wrote about this film industry, people who worked in the film industry at the lower levels. So he kind of politically, uh, his work, I found a certain alignment with his work. And then I translated Vasanti, woman novelist, and the novel was mostly about women. In fact, it was my first work in which all the characters were women. You know, uh, it went on. So there is nothing like a template, but only what I. But I was conscious that I was translating writers only from the upper caste, and therefore I should. I mean, I was aware that there were fantastic writers from all walks of life and all parts of society in Tamil. And so it was up to me to actually seek them out and seek those works out and translate, and which I did. Devi Bharati. Devi Bharati kind of, he was going for a residency in Switzerland or something, and he wanted a couple of stories that he could read out there in translation. And he approached me, and I translated it for them. And then they came out so well that we were able to get a commission for a collection of his short stories. And the editor liked the collection so much that she commissioned a novel, his first novel, which is published as The Solitude of the Shadow. Yeah. So, and Pumani also I discovered the same way. Uh, I was really shocked that someone like Pumani had not been translated at all. Uh, you know, uh, maybe like for 30, 40 years since he started writing. So I wanted to correct that. So it goes on. Yeah, I do believe that literature and translation are political acts, and and literature is one space where there is room for everybody. Maybe it's one of the last few spaces where there's room for everybody. Uh, so we need to keep it that way.
That's a wonderful sentence to think about. Like literature is the last space that is available for all the people for their voices to come forward. But I want to take your reflections on your relationship with Ashoka Mitran, right? And through that question, I also want you to explore how much does the relationship between the author, the actual author, and the translator and the text will affect the outcome of it, right? So reflections on that.
Okay, it's difficult to because it's all subjective. It's very difficult to say. But let me say this: you have asked the question that what are the things about the author and the text you make yourself aware before translating? Okay, now what I make myself aware is the oeuvre of the author. I have this text to translate by this author. I would read a few other texts by the author to generally get an idea of the themes and concerns that recur in the author, and the class, caste, and gender location of the author too, because nowadays it's an important way of knowing somebody, right? And there is also the fact that when you choose writers who've been writing for like 20, 30 years, there's a lot of material available because somebody or the other would have interviewed them. You know, these writers are regularly interviewed, and therefore there's a lot of material available on where they came from, why they wrote, what are their concerns, and so on. Who are their influences, and so on. So, so I would read them, and if you're part of the milieu, you already know even before you think of translating that author. So that is one of the advantages of being part of the milieu, because you're already equipped with knowledge that you would need for a translator. So that is very important. It is very important to not just focus on the text in question, but to uh, to see where it comes from. Which oeuvre it comes from, and also which kind of general context it comes from. What were the other books being written, you know, during the same period? So all that. I mean that kind of gives you a sharper awareness of what the text stands for and what it's trying to say. It's not just a flat text, It brings it alive in your imagination as a cultural product, so to speak.
We are recording this podcast especially a few days after the work that you have translated, Vadivasil, was now reissued through a different publication. Could you reflect a bit on the importance of this text and how it remained an enduring classic for a long time? The context being even before your reissue of Vadivasil, the Vadivasil came out as a graphic novel, right? Dialogue written by Perumal Mugan and illustrated by Apu Pen. So, could you reflect on Vadivasil itself?
I mean, there are very many specialities to Varivasal. One of it is that it's the first sporting novel in in uh, in Tamil. I think that in Indian languages, the sporting novel is rare, right? Novel which is centered on a particular sport, that traditional or modern. So it's a uh, so that was a kind of highlight of striking feature of the novel. And the second thing is that the important thing is that Chelappa had written the novel as describing a contest between man and animal. Okay, and the the man came from the working classes and the from the peasant class actually, and the animal came from the stable of a zamindar. So there is that oppositions, the social conflict as well. And unlike Hemingway, who was focused on the matador and his manliness and his bravery and so on, and his blood, for Chelappa, the bull was as important as the bull tamer. You know, it was a kind of, he gave equal space to the bull, which is historically very understandable from our region, right? Because cattle, we are basically an agrarian society, or we were. This body Vassal was written just after independence. So for us, cattle hold an important place in our imagination, and uh, so there is all that, and there is also Jallikattu, which is the traditional sport in which Tamils take a lot of pride. And the fourth thing is the sheer craft of the novel. The both the way it's constructed and the way it is written. In terms of language, they were all very special, and people understood it. So you don't have to be a very fastidious reader to understand. And so it kept getting uh, read by succeeding generations. And I think in 2008, a translation appeared under Sahitya Academy, but it kind of went nowhere. It disappeared. And then 2013 was when I picked it up and translated it. And once the translation appeared, then it was picked up by various universities in Tamil Nadu as a textbook. So it was a double whammy. They could teach about Tamil culture or a traditional Tamil sport, and also teach an English text or a translated text. So it sold a lot, and it became popular. It received very good reviews.
And we hear Surya is coming up with a movie based on that novel. Is that true?
Vetrimaran, the director is. Yeah, Surya is supposed to act in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's been in the works for some 2-3 years, but yeah, I think it's nearing completion now.
No, we are looking forward to that also. But here is where I want to. So one interesting thing that you have said about Vadivasal is that it is a sporting novel, right? Very rarely the sport becomes a center feature of literary texts in India. But the second thing, which is also interesting, is as much as there are working class protagonists in that novel, the Kari Bull is also equal protagonist. And another novel that you have translated, Punachi, Black Goat becomes the protagonist. Usually, animals become protagonists in the children's fiction, right? They are not in the arena of fiction written by young people, right? Only thing that I can remember is Animal Farm by George Orwell, right? So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, first I would say that Kari and Punachi are not the same kind of protagonists, because we know nothing about Kari's inner life, you know, and or its sexual urges or whatever. So it's not so anthropomorphic as Punachi is, right? We know about Kari only when Kari is in the arena and it's sort of, facing its antagonist, the bull tamer, right? And it's done beautifully, and all the tricks and all is just cunning and so on. So yeah, and this happened because Chilapa wanted to give equal space to the bull and the man. Uh, so that's how it happened. So it's fine. The Kari is described to the extent that uh, it is it is facing this situation. But we don't know anything about the life trajectory of Kari and how it came of age and all that. So it's a different kind of protagonist. It's sort of we know we get acquainted with Kari for only the length of an afternoon. Of course, it's a very important afternoon in its life and in the life of the novel, but only that. Whereas Punachi is different. You said how do animals become the protagonist of a novel? In the preface, Perumal Murugan explains it very well. He got into trouble writing one part woman, in which the characters are identified with a certain caste, and then it led to a controversy. So he said that I didn't want to write about humans because it kind of it landed me in trouble. So I decided to write about animals, but he said that cats and dogs are meant for poetry. Cows and pigs are too controversial for obvious reasons. And therefore, goats and sheep are the only thing. Like between goats and sheep, goats are more energetic. And therefore, I chose to write about goat. This is what he says, the preface. So I guess that's how this goat became a protagonist. I mean, he makes it a female goat, and then he takes it through the whole female life cycle. And Punachi is too well known for me to talk about it.
No, I think this Punachi whole controversy makes Punachi more interesting. I remember Perumal Murugan imposing a self-imposed exile on him and
Yeah, yeah,
stop it to
yeah.
write, and then he
Yeah, this was the first novel that he wrote after the exile. Yeah.
after the exile, this is the first novel. Right, picking up would have been not an easy task because I'm sure you would also have thought about the controversies that it might get into. But we are glad that
Mm.
it was picked up.
Yeah, by the time Punachi was published, the court case against, it was settled. And, the judge said that a writer should write and nothing should come in the way. So he wasn't facing that kind of danger. But yeah,
Would you like to reflect on the censorship on the literature, the threats faced by authors, the text itself?
I haven't paid it that much attention, really.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think that in Tamil Nadu, I think films are subject to a lot of informal censorship,
Not
which I've written about, but books not so much.
Now, my next question to you is how much power do you think the translators hold over the text, right? How do they decide the words that they have to use? I want to specifically get your reflections on the one short story that you have translated by Devi Bharati into English from Tamil. The story is actually titled Bali in Tamil, which equates with sacrifice, violence, and etc. And you titled the story as Victim. So, different kind of emotion both these titles evoke, right? Violence and victims. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, uh, first, let me just say that the translator has or ought to have complete control over the text because it's going under his name, right? And so, yeah, other people intervene, they make intervention, they collaborate. The editors, particularly the copy editors, line editors in the publisher. And also, I also make it a point to show to the author. In case they come up with some inaccuracies, factual inaccuracies, and so on, somebody like Ashokamitran would also suggest some improvement in expression, which was fine. If I said uh, tea stall, he would say eatery. I mean that is a roadside tea stall. He would say roadside eatery, which is a good uh, improvement on which is more accurate. But otherwise, a translator should have complete control over the text. I mean, that is one part. Now we come to Bali. In Tamil, the same word has several meanings. Bali is sacrifice, the act of giving sacrifice, ritual sacrifice. It is also the thing that is sacrificed. So in this particular story, the protagonist is sacrificed through social discrimination and prejudice and all that. Okay, uh, and oppression. Okay, and therefore I took it as a metaphor and said it's kind of it may not be elegant to call him the thing that is sacrificed, but it obviously you kind of secularize it and make it victim. A victim is also somebody who is sacrificed to somebody else's urges or somebody else's interests. So that's why I named it victim.
So I want to take your reflections on that. maybe troubles that you face while translating something very language specific, right? The idioms and jokes, right? Especially. So how do you tackle that issue? Because what might,
Culture specific, yeah.
yeah, culture specific idioms and jokes.
So in culture specific idioms and sayings and jokes and all that, the important thing is that uh, you have to get the sense. Sometimes there are equivalents in English. Okay, sometimes in Tamil they say "Kaatrulla bode thootrikol," uh, which roughly means make hay while the sun shines. You know, the take advantage of the moment is what it means. Uh, take advantage of the conditions of a particular period. Uh, so those, if you're aware of them, and you become aware of them through constant reading, right? So then you can use them. But otherwise, you cannot use them. You cannot translate them literally because literally, if you translate them literally, it won't make any sense. So you have to find some equivalent, or you have to find some way to get it across. You know, uh, while keeping the words as they are, but inventing an expression that will convey the sense. It won't be an English expression, but it won't be a Tamil expression either. It'll be something that you've invented to convey that sense. That is here you can be very creative too.
But is there some things which make a translation good? Like, is it a good translation, bad translation, things like that?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. There's good writing and bad writing, and there's good translation and bad translation. But you know, there are two things involved here. One is the technical, the obvious defects. A translation may have obvious defects. The Walter Benjamin, the cultural theorist, he talks about how a translation is analogous to an image. You know, there is no theory of image, right? An image is an image. That's all, and you sort of respond, and there can be several images of the same object, and your response to each image is subjective. You know, it sort of what it evokes in you is what the response is. It depends both on the image and on you, right? That's what it really means. Now, a translation is similar to that. Okay. Now you could take an image and find out what are the defects. It may have some obvious defects like the lighting is not proper, or it is overexposed, or or it's shaky, blurred, and things like that. Similarly, where the grammar is off, and the word choice is wrong, sentence structure is awry, and so on. So you can do that, but once the obvious defects are done away with, and obvious defects can be corrected through editing. It's not a big deal. So once you have the edited manuscript of one or more translations, then which you think is better, that is completely subjective. And the thing is that in my mind and in the mind of several translators, a good translation is something that will make the reader, that evoke in the reader, or that will affect the reader in the same way as the original did, or the reader in the original. Okay. Or close to that. Okay. And just given the limitations of, the host, the target language. So that's the ideal that we are all striving for. So the reader can decide to what extent we have achieved that ideal or not, subjectively. So that's how it is. Of course, there is good translation and bad translation. Yeah, but that is for the reader to decide. And if a community of readers decides that something is a good translation, it probably is.
Then it's a good.
That's subjective.
No, what What are the biggest challenge that you face as a translator in India? I think one thing for sure is the financial issues, right? The money which the book
Yeah.
fetches or not. But what are some of the other challenges that you face as a translator?
I mean, in my case, because I started translating maybe 30 years ago, uh, the isolation was a big issue because for about the first 15 years, I didn't know any other translator. I knew that they were there, but there was no forum for us to meet. And the second thing is that translators are seldom invited to the launches of their own books. It's not acceptable, but that's the practice. Uh, they don't think that they should be given the same space as the author. So as a translator, you don't have visibility. It's improving a lot now because translations have become more important, and therefore, you have to accord some space to the translator. But it's always been the case that the translator is kind of uh, treated as and not only are they not paid, they are also treated as several notches below the author, if you like. So this was a problem. But the one that affects me personally is the uncertainty about getting reviewed. I mean, it's improved a lot now, but you never know whether your book will get reviews or not. For instance, recently I contributed to an anthology of short stories in Tamil called The Best Stories of Our Times. It's about 5 months now since it was released, and only three reviews have appeared. I mean, uh, they're all laudatory reviews, and by intelligent reviewers who've read it closely uh, and brought out what's good about it and why people should read it and all that. But considering that there are 20 outlets which could have potentially reviewed it, and to which a copy was sent for review, only three reviewed it, found the space to review it. So this kind of thing, a book on which you have worked hard can sink without a trace because not it's not received the kind of visibility that ought to have, and that's not in your hands.
No, I think
Of course, it's easy enough for somebody to say your book didn't deserve that visibility, but that's a different thing. Uh,
no, if I can share this one thing with you, your translation of Devi Bharati, Farewell Mahatma, I have found it in a London bookshop, and that's where I have first read it, right? So I think there's actually a wider
right.
spread for your translations in particular. But I understand this challenge, especially in terms of getting reviews, right? And some reviews uh, just summarize it without taking any critical aspect, and
Yeah.
that's one big challenge translation face. But that is where I want to take you to. Could you give some reflections on this whole translator ecosystem in India? Because you have already mentioned that translators being not called for the launch of their own books is one big challenge. And we have seen recently the JCB prize for books was also closed, which actually used to give many awards for the books and translation. Give some reflections on this translation ecosystem in India and what can be done to overcome the challenges it faces.
I mean, this is not a original idea, but one of the things that we've been discussing is that translators should have a guild like association where they could exchange their experiences uh, and then sort of bargain for you know better terms. You know, sometimes publishers prefer to pay you a fixed amount instead of a royalty, and should you take that, or should you be paid as much as the author? So I think in literary translation, the translator should be paid exactly the same as the author. or the terms should be the same. That's my position. So I mean, then it's a kind of going to a cattle fair and bargaining, as an individual. Uh, but if there is a guilt, then people would know what other people are getting, and so there would be we could arrive at some reasonable norm and enforce it, not enforce it, but extract it out of the publishers. So that is a thing. But otherwise, no, it's the publishing system works okay, but the reviewing system doesn't. And also the other thing is the discourse. You know, uh, there's hardly any discourse on. Apart from the reviews are only like 800, 1,000 words or whatever, or even less. And they appear and then they disappear. But there is no discourse on a body of work. Suppose I translate 5 books by Ashoka Mitran, then there should be some discourse on what kind of writer he is and what does his work represent, right? Uh, that kind of discourse doesn't happen because the writer has to know Tamil and they should be able to write in English, and there are very few of them. In fact, I have tried to do something like that, but I haven't found the time to do a lot of it. For instance, the first essay on Perumal Murugan, which is published before the controversy, I wrote it. It is a long form essay on the Kungunadu novels of Perumal Murugan. It appeared in Caravan in 2013. And then I wrote on Pomani earlier. So that kind of thing doesn't. I also contribute to essays to anthologies and things like that. Uh, but we need to get there, and it is definitely the responsibility of the source language community to do this, because they are the ones who are presenting. There was a time when there were many Tamil writers living in Delhi, and they were sort of part of that milieu as well, and therefore they effectively represented the modern Tamil literature in Delhi, other places. But now it's difficult, and also I think that everything has to be incentivized nowadays. So that's a problem. But this thing of our producing 100 translation titles every year and having so little discourse on it is a problem that we need to solve. Because unless there is discourse, I mean, people wouldn't have a reason to read. It'll only be a commodity, right? Unless people get the larger picture, big picture, and they are motivated enough to find out something that is important, and there are essays and material to tell them that it's important, they may not come to it at all. So this is another way of expanding the readership. The discourse is very important. It is not. It is necessary, but is not sufficient. But we'll come to that.
No, I guess
Uh,
this is about the reader ecosystem, right? So people have to read more, especially if the discourse has to develop on translations, we need bilingual readers, right? Who reads them both in original as well as
yes.
translation
Yeah,
to
yeah. But the thing is that I was also thinking that translators themselves could do it. Translators are bilingual by definition. So they could read other translations other than their own and write about them. That's also possible. See, the thing is that in Delhi, where there are institutions, where there are, we know a lot more about Nirmal Varma and Krishna Sokti and, many of the luminary Mahasweta Devi and Sunil Gangopadhyay and all that. We know a lot more about them than they know about Ashoka Mitran or Sundar Ramaswamy or, people like that. So that's, or even M.T. Vasudevan Nair. It's a problem. So we need to do something about it. Sahitya Academy does what it can, they have something called Architects of Indian Literature and so on. They have a series on writers. It's very valuable. But the general public doesn't read them. And the influential people in the English language publishing and readership don't read them. So it's
Yes, with the Sahitya Academy, the small biographies that release on important literary figures in all
exactly, yeah.
languages.
Profiles rather than biographies, yeah.
The profiles, they are actually very interesting. And affordable, right? That's one thing about them.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but I think their accessibility could increase to improve the reader ecosystem. I want to ask this one question, which is a slightly opinion-based question, which is so I teach at an university, and when I ask the students to read something, they ask me to give readings which will be productive, and they do not want to read for experiential purposes. So there's this chasm that exists between productive reading and experiential reading. So if I pose the same question to you, what would be your response?
No, what do you mean by productive reading?
Uh,
What
something
kind
which
of
will something which will help them think, something which will develop their skills, and they just don't want to read for the reading's sake, to understand it, to
But will
spend
give them
time.
knowledge, useful knowledge.
Yes, something that will give them
Yeah.
useful knowledge per se.
I would think that reading fiction is very productive, in the sense that it gives you, what Susan Sontag says. She says that the function of literature is to educate the heart and the mind, and to extend your experience, and to make you aware, and to develop inwardness, because when you read, you disclose to yourself the meaning of what you read, because it's not like seeing an object, right? uh, and and also, you become aware that there are other worlds other than yourself. There are people other than yourself who are just as valid as you are, and these are all fundamental to living in this world. So it's and experiencing the world. So it's very productive. I mean, I would think it brings you knowledge that no other mode of knowledge can, no other source of knowledge can bring. A
That,
story like Bali, for instance, where can you learn that, right? Or Punachi. So, and it nourishes the imagination also, because because uh, because to understand the world, you have to use your imagination as well. So, because the individual is very limited in time and space. So, and yeah, particularly reading translations is important because, as Susan Sontag says again, uh, translations are the circulatory system of world literatures, and you just have to let the blood flow, to make yourself more vital, right?
that's a very interesting phrase, to illustrate the importance of translation. I want to ask you about two writers' works who you have translated. Firstly, being Perumal Murugan. Can you share some favorite snippet with him?
My association with Perumal Murugan started with my writing a long form essay on his novels for Caravan magazine. And I read his novels, read his entire collection of novels for about 3 months. And then I went to Namakkal to meet him. And I spent a whole day with him, asking about his younger days and how he came into writing, and, what his politics were and all that. And to put it into the essay, obviously. So I got to know him slightly. And then after that, I didn't have much to do with him. And when this publisher, Juggernaut Books, they were looking at bringing out a collection of his short stories, they thought of me because I had already written about it. And so they said, "Would you like to do it?" I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And it was during the course of, translating the stories that were in the collection Goat Thief, that I interacted with him regularly. And I would ask, because as you know, there are a lot of regional dialect in his writings, and so I didn't always understand. And moreover, he used to be very amused. Uh, there were several expressions which completely escaped me because they were usually about some body part or the other or some bodily function, you know. And so I used to ring up and or I used to write to him and ask him what it means, and he used to tell me. Yeah, he trusted me with his work, and for which I'm very grateful. And he gave help me whenever I needed it in terms of providing clarifications, and you know. So it was a good working relationship I had with him, both for the Goat Thief and Punachi.
Any memory that you want to share with Devi Bharati, the other novelist that you translate?
Then Devi Bharati, I knew him personally in the sense that we used to go and hang out. He was in Madras and so on. Devi Bharati also, I read his work, and I also read his. He's written two memoirs, memoir like collection of essays on his political evolution and on his evolution as a writer, his younger days and so on. So it was, so I got to know him through his writing, and I've met him a few times, and we have uh, talked with him, and I know what makes him right the way he does. What are his chief concerns? For instance, Devi Bharati lives in a village. He has lived in a village for about the past 7 years, and he's produced three great novels. He's kind of very. I know that Dostoevsky and Gandhi were his great influences, and so on. So all this actually gives you a feel for the complexity of the person and therefore of his work.
Any suggestions that you want to give for readers and aspiring translators?
For readers, I would say read widely uh, and read translations also, because there's a circulatory system of the world's literature. Read to expand your heart and mind, and read to extend your experience. That's important, and find community with other readers. Okay, that be aware that the books you read come from society, and therefore you should find your connection to society through them. As far as aspiring translators are concerned, I mentor translators, emerging translators, and I gave them a sheet with do's and don'ts. But I'm not going to do it. I'm only going to say it. You have to read widely in both languages so that your language becomes supple. You become confident of using the language. The second thing is that you should read whatever text very closely. You should be inside the text when you're translating. And it's like almost like ventriloquism. You're speaking from inside the text. You're voicing the text, as it were. To capture the tone and the music and the mood and everything else. So that is what you have to do. And third is find your own community among the translators. Don't isolate yourself. There is strength in numbers, and there is also a lot of. It is a rewarding experience if you're involved in the same practice. It's to exchange notes and learn from the others and learn with them also. So now there are opportunities and platforms to do all this. So it's not that difficult as it was in my age.
So I think now the onus is on us to read more and to translate more. Kalyan Raman, thank you so much for your time.